We're calling ourselves Jack, seeing red, and losing our minds in a never-ending hell maze. That means we're either doing a great job maintaining the fabulous Overlook Hotel, or we're playing Jack Bros on this episode of Doki Doki Game Club. Hello and welcome to Doki Doki Game Club, a retro video game podcast. I am your host, Brandon Fincher, and I am joined today by a trio of Megami Tensei senseis. Frank Martin.
Hee-ho!
Brian Grogan.
Hiya.
And Mr. Joseph Luster.
Hello there.
On Doki Doki Game Club, we each take a turn choosing a particular title from video game history, and we announce the selection online so everyone can play along at home. From there, we have 2 weeks to spend with the title, at which point we reconvene to dig into the ins and outs of the selection. Today's pick was made by Frank, and the title is Jack Bros for the Nintendo Virtual Boy. Jack Bros was released for the Nintendo Virtual Boy for Japan and North American audiences in 1995. Despite being a spin-off title, Jack Bros was the first game within the Megami Tensei franchise to be released in North America. All right, boys and boys. And boys.
Oh, yes. The Virtual Boys.
The Virtual Boys.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that feels like a wasted opportunity.
I know, right? There's got to be a podcast out there that's the Virtual Boys.
Right? Well,
there is now.
Official name change right now. Go ahead and update your download URLs. And
Doki
it's
Doki
not too
Virtual
late.
Boys.
So I want to begin with a forward to all listeners here as an apology that I have come into this experience with almost zero knowledge or familiarity with this game or the series to which this game is connected to. I know that we got a lot of diehard listeners out there who are fans of the Persona series. I'm aware that this game exists in that universe, but all I know is that that's the game where one of them kids shoot themselves in the head, and and then other weird things happen. But yeah, I haven't had the patience to play a JRPG in an eon. But I do believe that some of you guys might have some experience with this franchise. I know it was Frank. We'll get to you, but Joseph and Brian, do you guys have you ever played this game before? First off, I guess that's probably the best place to start.
I've played some Virtual Boy games, and this is one that I always saw the cover for, and I thought it looked really cool, but I never played it because I didn't have a Virtual Boy. I just knew people that were unfortunate enough to have spent the money on one, and I used to play them all the time in the mall kiosks, you know.
Yeah, man, that's so weird. It's just a piece of hardware that I was aware of through magazines, and that's it. I don't recall ever seeing it. I think 1995 might have been a weird point in time for my gaming history.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you never saw one in real life, Brandon?
Never.
Oh man.
Wow.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, I surely have walked past one at say MagFest or something, and seen one in passing, but I've never put my hands on one. I don't know.
I think it's something everyone should experience once for sure. But
Absolutely.
but beyond that, I have limited, but I have some experience with the Megami Tensei franchise. I've played some Persona games. I have never completed one, and I've played some of the other SMT games Soul Hackers and stuff like that. But I haven't played probably as many as our homie Frank here. But what about you, Brian?
Well, to go back to Virtual Boy, they had one Virtual Boy on display at the Toys R Us in my town, and that was I tried that out a couple of times, but mutual friend of ours, Zach, you know him, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He owns a Virtual Boy, and I think all but one or two of the games for it. I think one of them's one or two of them are really expensive. So he brought that to some mutual gatherings, and I had the occasion to test them all, and I can say that, perhaps sorry to say that Jack Bros and I think Innsmouth no Yakata were the two games that gripped me the most out of all the titles. So that was a few years ago. I ended up, actually beating both of those games. So that was kind of blew right through Jack Bros. But then he told me that it was part of the Megami Tensei series, which meant Jack all to me.
Yeah.
Very appropriate to be Jack.
Yeah,
All you.
exactly. Yeah. And I had no idea that Persona was related to Megami Tensei series, so I'm completely in the dark with that. But yeah, I've played this.
Well, that feels like a good opportunity maybe for Frank to give us a sort of crash course, some layman's terms, and what this series is about. I guess kind of give us maybe a macro to micro approach. Like,
Sure.
What is the universe? Like, what's the story there? And how do we get to Jack Bros from there?
Basically, it's a series that started off as a book series in Japan. And then the first book was translated into a video game for the NES called Megami Tensei. So there's Megami Tensei 1 and 2, and then there's like a soft reboot that happened on the Super Nintendo called Shin Megami Tensei, which is whatever. And then the story is basically Loki pretends he's the god
Loki, the Greek god. Okay.
Yeah, or the Isengard one or whatever.
Mm-hmm. What is that?
Asgard?
Norse, right?
Norse, yeah, there.
Yeah.
So he pretends to be like the president of the United States or something like that, and then bombs Japan. And then basically demons start like rampaging all over Japan, and then there's nuclear war, and then basically it's one of the first games that had the good versus evil kind of choices, so you can either go like chaos or law.
Okay.
And then depending on your outcome, it changes the world afterwards. So basically every other game afterwards follows the same format except Persona, which is a spin-off series.
These are all JRPGs?
Yeah. Yeah, and they were all dungeon crawlers, so like most of them anyways, the later ones like 3, 4 and whatever.
And the best part is, or that I, from what I've played, is that in most of them you can one of the gimmicks is that you can like recruit monsters. So instead of beating them in a battle, you can just like befriend them or be like convince them to come over with like basically like solving riddles and.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's basically Pokemon before Pokemon existed.
Yeah, that's what I was going to make that.
Yeah, you talk to a demon and then you answer some questions. He's like, "Oh, do you want to kill people?" And depending on if it's a bad demon or a good demon, and it depends what you say, he'll join you. And
that's kind of cool.
It's a really fun series.
Boy, I have to imagine. Well, okay, let's get some clarification first. So you mentioned NES and Super Nintendo. I have to assume that you mean.
Famicom and yeah.
Okay. Just want to clear that up
because this is the first like stateside Megami Tensei game.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So at that point, any idea what we're looking at games wise before this came out? Was it just the NES and Super Famicom title?
Probably. There was a spin-off title called Last Bible on the Game Boy that was also an RPG. And it was geared towards kids.
Okay. Boy, there's a lot of Nintendo of America trigger warning going on in this episode because Bible, Demon, things like that. I have to assume that if these games ever saw the light of day over here, they would have been kind of chopped up.
They kind of tried to join the Pokemon ranks with like a white Bible and black Bible, like two different games ahead. Yeah, and it was like they're called Demi Kids or something like that. It was translated for the stateside, but I think it's called.
Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but because I'm just going off what I remember from like the PS1 days. But was the first Persona the first one of these to actually come out in English, as far as the RPGs
Persona
go? Persona
1, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
and that's
Persona
a PS1
1,
title.
Yes.
Yeah, Persona 1 is a spin-off series where the only ties that it has to the original series, which is Jack Bros as well, is just the demons.
Okay.
And their designs.
Nothing continuing with that bizarre Loki bombing Japan.
Because every game is kind of its own set piece. Like it's kind of like a Final Fantasy. They're not really tied to one another.
If you had to describe an element that chains them together, I mean, I suppose like if I tried to think of like a Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy has
games that...
like Final Fantasy has Sid in every game.
Okay.
Well, this has Jack Frost in every game.
Oh, perfect connection, perfect segue.
There we go.
Yeah. So basically, this game is I don't know if you wanted to get to the pitch for it, but
oh no, we'll get to that. Yeah, okay, but I mean, unless there are any other comments or questions about history.
No, well, the thing is that I always wanted to play it, but I never got a chance to because there's always something better to play than a virtual boy game. But yeah, so when when we thought of this podcast, and then you came up with the idea of, let's play some games that we never play but kind of wanted to play.
Right.
This was definitely one of the first on my list, and I'm kind of glad I picked it just for your reaction.
Well, we'll get to that shortly, but unless there's any other talk of history, I'd say it's time for
Back of the Box.
The portal between Earth and another mysterious dimension has opened, and the intrepid Jack brothers have come through for an adventure in our world. Having lost track of time, they now have only 1 hour to return to their home or be banished forever. Help them battle hordes of loathsome enemies through 6 electrifying 3D levels, each with many floors to explore and conquer. This is one phenomenal adventure you can't afford to miss.
Okay, Mr. Martin. Lay it on me. What's the nutshell of this wacky game?
I would say if you want to have a Zelda Bomberman Gauntlet clone and then put it in a reddish, hellish hue and then just populate it with Mega 10 characters, Mega 10 being Megami Tensei, that's pretty much it. That's
all right. Yeah, I there's some things in that statement I can agree with, and some things that I'm going to fight you tooth and nail on. But we can dig into that.
So what is that, Mega 10? Is that like what the kids call?
Yeah,
that's weeb speak, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. No offense to our weeb listeners. So, all right. Who wants to lay it on me and like kind of explain the very specific nature of this game? I know we've got some references there to hopefully help listeners at home who didn't get a chance to play along to get a ballpark impression in your mind. But this game is neither Zelda, Bomberman, or Gauntlet. Maybe closest to Gauntlet, but
maybe in that it's top down.
Okay.
I would say one of and there are enemies who use bombs in it that you have a Bomberman like arc.
That's true.
So,
Yeah.
And there are all these like Link-looking archers.
and there are
Okay.
keys.
All right. Now
There are
you
keys
you
also,
guys are starting
so,
to make
yeah.
it
There
clear
are
for me.
keys. Yeah.
And if you pick the not Pyrojack, the Jack Ripper, as he's called, he doesn't have a projectile. He has a knife, so kind of
true.
like Link.
Okay, all right. It's starting to come together.
He has a straight
I'll give you
razor.
a
He
certain
looks like
concession.
Yeah, he has a straight razor.
I'm
Cut
not mad at
somebody
the
up.
comparison anymore. It's not bad.
Yeah. Now it's a great game. Let's go ahead and have a love fest here. No, so the most prominent part of that statement that I want to focus on is that hellish reddish hue. Golly Gertie, playing virtual boy games must have been real hard back then because it's
But that's why it
real hard
failed.
now.
It failed horribly, and that's probably one of the reasons.
Well, that's why and they also have a warning at the beginning of every game that's like, "Hey, you should only play this for 20 minutes or go see a doctor."
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It'll alert you. It'll start like ringing a tone if you play
if you
for too
play
long.
for 30
Man,
minutes.
I
or more.
noticed that and I turned it off. And to be honest with you, as I played through this game, I doubt that I played it for 30 minutes in a single setting.
Honestly,
anyhow.
you should have kept it on just to like preserve your sanity, so like you knew when to stop.
One thing I want to point out is that the blessed makers of the emulator program that I used to run this game, spoiler alert, it's hard to find a Virtual Boy.
Yeah.
They had the good graces to give the user the ability to switch from the Virtual Boy's native red and dark red to black and white. Which, if you're listening at home and you decide to seek this game out after we talk about it, definitely see if yours does that, because it makes it like playing a Game Boy game, which is a much more.
I played in
In my
red. I played
opinion,
red the
tolerable
whole
experience.
time.
I played it in red the
played
whole
red.
time
And-
too.
So you're asking for before we get too far into this, you're asking for like a kind of a broader description of it, I guess.
Yes, please.
I would call it it's a timer maze play game.
Yeah.
And in that you basically have you start out with a set number of time. You can pick up timers to increase your time, but you have to get through each level within a set number of seconds, basically.
Right.
And
it's important to point out that timer that you mentioned also doubles as your health.
yes.
Yeah.
So taking damage decreases your time.
And every different enemies take off different amounts of health. So if you hit like a spike trap, you'll lose 30 seconds or something like that. It depends on what kind of thing you do. So what you do as you can choose between Jack Frost, Jack Lantern, or Jack Skeleton. Maybe we'll get into the differences between their names. Like Jack Lantern in Japan is Pyro Jack, and Jack Skeleton in Japan is Jack Ripper, which is a really good name.
Definitely.
And you have to go through these mazes. There's 6 stages. You have to go through and get keys so you can unlock the exit for each floor. And when you do, this is where the 3D effect comes in.
The only place really that it comes in.
I mean, other than the parallax you would be seeing in the background of the floor below you, but then you drop down into the next floor until you eventually reach the boss of each stage, and rinse repeat for 6 stages that get increasingly longer.
The last one is insanely long.
Now, Brian, maybe you can comment on this since you did spend, or I mean, anyone really, since you guys have spent more time certainly than I have with a Virtual Boy game. The popular consensus that I managed to kind of get a feel for by doing some searches online is that this game, out of most Virtual Boy games, I suppose, does not really sufficiently utilize the Virtual Boy's 3D capability. Is that a fair statement? Or, I mean, do you because a lot of what I've seen when I looked up Virtual Boy games was they often were in first person. Or at
pseudo,
like a pseudo first person, like you're doing some sort of hallway crawl.
Because when I think of the Virtual Boy, I think of that weird Mario game where there's like turtle shells coming at you. So that like the whole gimmick is 3D, right? You got these turtle shells coming at you, and then there's like 3D Tetris where you play Tetris but in a 3D environment. So like it's like I said, it's very.
It was functional, where this is just kind of visually like watching the far. You had the parallax scrolling.
I mean,
it's
the same with like there's a Wario game on there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that was just like a parallax also basically.
It didn't really utilize it either. Yeah.
That's that Wario game's a side scroller.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. See, I could see that working better to me for some reason than the top down, because I mean, you're really, I guess, just for me at least, in most cases, I wasn't looking at that.
No,
descending floor beneath, like the
floor. I think it was supposed to be in the background. I mean, it's like parallel.
I actually thought it was kind of a cool effect because
I thought it was a cool effect
and I kind of thought it actually looked 3D enough for me on my
just on one
monitor.
day, yeah, not one day, you know what I mean.
Which dimension is the one dimension? Well, okay, so you mentioned that there are 3 main characters that you can choose from that are sort of integral to the story and to the universe. Jack Frost, the aforementioned Jack Frost, is the kind of the connecting character between all these games.
They're all connecting characters. Like every enemy and every character is in the like Megami Tensei franchise.
Okay, even in the Persona titles?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, very good. Well, then maybe somebody give me a breakdown on what it is to play with these 3 different characters. Like, I mean, there's nothing worse than a game where you've got an option of of characters to choose from, only to find that they play exactly the same. So, what is it about these guys that sets that apart?
They're very different, I think, in this, and you can get very different experiences playing, depending on who you choose. Like Jack Frost has, he shoots projectiles, but they're weaker. Yet they fire at a higher rate.
Okay.
His special like freezes everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Do any damage?
Yeah, they all have specials too.
Yeah.
I didn't actually play as Jack Lantern, aka Pyro Jack, but I know that he's kind of like mid damage, slower fire.
Yeah, I actually went with him when I played through it. So,
and did you guys? What was his special?
It was just fireballs.
Just damage everything on the screen.
And then we have my dude, who's actually the only reason that I found this game enjoyable was playing through as Jack Skeleton, aka Jack Ripper, because while he's melee only, he holds out his little switchblade. He does the highest damage, so you can basically kind of walk through holding your knife out. And
just kill everything.
You run into enemies in one hit. The bosses take a few less hits than they normally do, even though you have to be right up in their face.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of has.
I found that to be real. I played both times as Jack Skeleton, and then I went back and tested the other ones. I think Pyro Jack might be. It's probably easier to go through levels as Jack Skeleton, but I think Pyro Jack is probably easier to beat bosses with.
Yeah, the bosses were a problem with Jack with Skeleton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know we're gonna get that into later, but there's a specific boss, like the spider boss, which
Yes.
with Jack Skeleton it's so impossible.
Yeah, it sucked. But
Well, let's move on to maybe a little more detail about the mechanics of the game. So, you mentioned chasing down time increasing icons or power ups, if you want to call them that. And this game, so I guess if anyone like me who had never really played a Virtual Boy game before, I had no idea that it had 2 sticks on it. And so I actually fired this game up and played through it with a SNES clone controller. And I was like moving around and I was going, okay, like, so you just go in the direction and you attack and that's fine. But then I kept seeing the Pixie notification pop up that I don't know if it was because I wasn't using a stick that just wasn't there or the second D-pad, but it was like telling me to make sure to use the whatever they call it on the Virtual Boy, the right D-pad, or it's going to be difficult. Is that something that you guys saw?
I got it too, but I never used that pad.
Oh, I definitely used it. Yeah, it was
interesting.
It's like I think it's a must for the game personally.
Well,
What does it do?
What is it, like a twin stick shooter?
Yeah,
It becomes a twin stick shooter. Yeah.
No, I had no idea.
Oh man, yeah.
And I know that you like twin stick shooters, Brian. So I thought that would be a connection with you when you play. That's interesting.
I don't remember using it on the Virtual Boy hardware. I remember it playing exactly. I mean, it's been years, so
it doesn't. There's not like an immediate roadblock with it. Like I mean, it's a maze and it's top down, so you're moving through corridors, you're moving left, right, and whatever, and you're immediately you're pointing yourself in the direction, and then you're just attacking, which is a completely valid way to play it. But the point that I really noticed it being beneficial to use the second stick. Or the second D-pad or whatever is during those boss fights.
Yeah,
like the ability to like strafe around them just made a huge difference. But
sure. But I played a character that didn't have projectiles. So
yeah,
but it's still helpful though because you can still scroll up hit the boss from the side, but like while walking up next to them. And
I don't know. I played it like a Zelda, like you just you hit what's in front of you kind of thing. I don't know.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, the my RetroPie and the PlayStation 4 controller doesn't want to play
work
nice.
Well, no.
Yeah. Sometimes the input is a mess, but I thought that was pretty interesting. That like the game had a built-in notification to remind you to use a button on a controller, which is weird. They must have realized that like most people are just used to using the left side D-pad on everything that came out before that.
It's amazing how many.
Did we have a DualShock in 1995? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. So, no, I don't know. Actually, no. I couldn't say with authority because I think that was around the time of the first PS1 controller because, like Resident Evil was out and they just had
just the normal D-pad and 4 buttons. But what's funny is that for people who haven't seen a controller, let me kind of explain it to you. It's a mirror image of itself. So one side is a D-pad and like A and B, but then on the other side is a D-pad and A and B in the same exact positions that it would be. So it's kind of like
it's kind of a mess, and it's like Nintendo's the master of these whack controller designs.
Yeah. I have to point out, though, that they're not the only ones kind of guilty of trying to make these. I don't know if the intention was for that was to be beneficial to left-hand players as well, or some sort of ambidextrous design. But they're like the second iteration, if I'm not mistaken, of the Lynx, like that portable Atari handheld, had like you could flip that, and there was like a switch on it. So you had it the same way you had 2 D-pads, but I don't know a whole lot about the Lynx, but I saw a pretty interesting YouTube video that was covering like the gems of the Lynx collection, and the guy had pointed out that like the version 2 or whatever of the handheld, you flip the switch and then like it turned the screen upside down, and then you reposition. You
just flip it,
yeah. You essentially just flip it. Yeah. So it's not the only ones, but and it seems like a good idea. I don't know. I'm right-handed. I don't know. Are any of you guys left-handed? Can you think back? Yeah. I mean, I wonder maybe if you're listening to this and you're a left-handed gamer, maybe you can write in and tell us if you had some sort of weird obstacle to overcome when you first started playing video games because the movement with the left, with the D-pad on the left just didn't jive. But I can't imagine that would be the case. It just seems so natural, to have movement on the left and buttons on the right. But I digress. So,
Yeah, I mean, I hold my TV remote with both hands, so yeah, I don't think. There's
Yeah, that's the
really an
only
issue
way you can. Yeah.
Did you guys use the auto fire toggle?
No.
there. I think it was always on auto fire for me. Wait,
Whatever the default is. I don't think I
yeah.
went into any sort of menu or anything.
Well, no, it's just like one of the extra buttons above the map. It would say auto fire
Yeah.
if you enabled it.
Okay, it said auto
Okay.
shot the whole time for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that just
Again,
means you can hold
I
it
only
down.
played the game once. Yeah, I think you just don't have to tap it. But I only
Yeah.
played the game once with the guy without projectiles, so I have no idea what it would do with him. Probably nothing.
Well, yeah, no, actually, yeah. You would if it didn't have that auto shot going, you would have to just keep on. He'd only stick his knife out for a second, so you'd have to.
Oh,
keep on
really? Okay, so I
slamming
guess
it.
by default,
Maybe I inadvertently,
Turn it off.
disabled it. Maybe it is enabled by default. I'm not sure.
I think it is.
Weird. So you just had to mash the button, and it was essentially like a stab.
Yeah, just keep on
Okay.
going. It's like stab as you're walking around. Yeah.
I like how we all played this completely
actually,
differently.
Yeah. Huh. Well,
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Virtual
Well,
Boy.
it's
Crazy.
a big experimental console. What do you expect?
Okay, so we've got this top-down sort of twin-stick shooter that you can or cannot play that way if you like. And a game like this sort of lives and breathes, I feel, by its variation in its level design and its enemies. So maybe we can sort of transition over into talks of that. What did you guys think in general of the stages? Because I've got some thoughts, and I kind of want to hear yours first.
Interestingly enough, I thought that it was pretty varied for just having a one color palette. By just like, I think the first level is kind of like, it looks like you're walking on planks, and like level 2 is like a forest, so it kind of looks like shrubbery and so on and so forth. So I feel like it was a little, at least trying to be varied. But it was still just straight corridors. You can't do much about that. Like, it's just put different obstacles in a corridor. That's it.
Well, yeah, no, it was kind of like they, made each maze, because there are only 6, so they had to make them more and more complex, and they just had to kind of steadily introduce more enemies and obstacles. It's a pretty simple and short game if you can tough it out.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy, by the way, because I had a hell of a time with this game.
I'm not. Yeah, we can talk about difficulty if you'd like, but for me the level design. I mean, I could see the differences from level to level, but I don't know, man. Like, if it's a combination of the monochromatic palette mixed with these really hard angles, there was really like nothing in the way of puzzles to solve.
No.
And because it was such tight corridors, it wasn't until boss fights start becoming an issue that the gameplay itself becomes fun at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You're essentially just moving through a hallway, finding a key, heading towards a blinking spot on a little sub map, and I don't know.
Well, again, just like the Game Boy, there's not much screen real estate. It's not like you're going to be like, I don't know, pushing blocks around and trying to get whatever, like, without it being too cumbersome.
I
really.
don't know. I kind of feel the need to dispute that, because it depends on your perspective, right? Because with a Game Boy, you're dealing with a piece of hardware where the screen is a finite size, and I realized that within the Virtual Boy headset thing, it had a pair of screens, one screen, with some sort of mirror effect. I'm not quite sure, but you could essentially make that. I mean, the resolution had to have been much higher than the Game Boy, and I feel foolish that we didn't have that info up right in front of us. But
I have no idea.
Yeah, I just feel like there's something about the practice of putting your face into that goggle set, or whatever you want to call the Virtual Boy, and putting your eyes into the eyepiece, that would enable a much broader field And I don't, when I played through this game, I don't go, oh, well, it's super tight. Like, I mean, if you listen to our last episode where we talk about Kid Dracula, we talk about like that sort of small real estate. And I think that's kind of what Brian's getting at. But I don't know. I didn't feel that it was, that the poor stage design was a byproduct of screen real estate. It just didn't seem that way to me.
I think it's just filler. I think they wanted to have 6 areas and they needed to have, X number of floors per area that keep, exponentially increasing per area. And then there's only so much you can do with the corridor,
Well,
right?
If you just to interject real quick, because I'm interested, the resolution on the Virtual Boy is 384 by 224 pixels.
Did you happen to get the Game Boy?
Yeah, it's 160 by 144. So no, it is quite a bunch bigger.
Yeah.
No, it's not quite double, but it's almost there.
Big enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, big enough to where they should have eliminated at least the Game Boy's degree of severity in regards to stage design.
But I think also what happens is that they have to make sprites and everything else kind of bigger to be able to notice it through the monochrome, maybe. Okay. Like, I would assume, because the characters are really big. They're kind of like chunky.
Well, yeah, let's maybe move into that a little bit. So as far as... because typically we like to talk about the aesthetics at the beginning of the sort of stage talk. And what did you guys feel in general about the aesthetics of the enemies and even the protagonist characters? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, that I know what they're based off, they're 1-to-1. Like, even like I think her name was Cat Lady, but her real name is Nekomata, which is this like cat lady. Looks pretty much 1-to-1 with her design, and like even Goblin and stuff like that. So I don't know. To me, you can differentiate everything, like except maybe.
Man, we're really coming at this from two different angles. It feels, because I felt like the sprite design, with the exception of maybe the Jack Bros themselves, was really muddy. Muddy, yeah, like just too complicated for a monochromatic palette.
Maybe if they had more detail, it could have been a little bit better. But
well, no, I'm feeling the opposite direction because
like
of the
too ambitious, maybe
because of the monochrome. When I say muddy and busy, I mean like take Goblin for instance. Like, it's difficult to tell like what is going on in that sprite. You kind of have this weird spiky head area, but then because of the nature of the general shapes for all the characters being fairly squat. Like, I mean, they're essentially blocks. I can tell what the knight is, or not the knight, Furin, I think they call it in the game. But he's like a knight character with a sword and shield. But Tomcat is difficult to really read at a distance. I don't know. To me, it just overambitious is definitely the word, Joseph.
Well,
I think.
I feel like one thing is that if you've seen like the original designs for the Megami Tensei games, like these enemy designs and like the demons, they're very buck wild. So it's kind of so like, I mean, I can see like how they ended up like that, because it's kind of like they're kind of compressing them and super deforming them for Virtual Boy. So yeah, I do think they're a little overambitious.
Because I'm looking at a picture of Goblin and then the one from Jack Bros. I don't know. I can see the difference between. Like,
I would argue, or I wouldn't argue, but I would implore listeners that maybe haven't played this to the difference between a still frame of one of these sprites and one of these sprites in movement is very different. And it's difficult to defend a claim of overcomplication when you're able to just like look at the still sprite. But I don't know. To me, like that's my claim on the aesthetics of it.
Sure.
I liked aspects of it. Like I said, I think the Jack Bro designs are cool, and I think because you get to see other images of them, like zoomed in, whether it be like a continue screens or menu designs, or even just like credits, the portraits at the character select screen. That helps. I think it helps inform me as a player when playing with these sprites. Like, I kind of don't need to see them in super great detail because I already know what they're supposed to look like. But when you're dealing with with the enemies in the game, where it's like, here's an enemy, and hopefully you can make out which direction he's pointing.
Well, since the Jack Bros themselves, they're like definitely more iconic designs in general, because I mean, Jack Frost is straight up Atlas's mascot, at this point. Right. So it's like I think they do stand out more because they're kind of designed to be more of these kind of quirky characters, whereas you do have just straight up regular demons that have been translated into this format.
But at the same time, like the last boss, which is Beelzebub, like his design is pretty 1-to-1 with his original design. But he's a big boss.
He's a big boss. I was going to say, like when you're dealing with those boss sprites, you've got a lot more to work with. Speaking of Beelzebub, which is a really cool design and like even true to the, I guess, Judeo-Christian mythology of Beelzebub being the Lord of Flies. Like I thought that was really cool. Like one of his attacks, like his like projectile flies.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anybody have any favorite bosses?
He is a big fly. Yeah. Favorite boss?
Not the spider one.
Not the spider one.
That's the worst one.
Yeah. No.
That and Sinister Scar are my least favorite. That Sinister Scar is the second boss. So it's a skull for people who haven't seen this. It's a skull that like flies and bounces around the boss arena, and Pixie warns you beforehand that this thing shoots out a snake, whenever it stops. But the reach on this snake is obscene,
and you can't really move fast enough to get.
No, you can be almost halfway. You can be more than halfway across the screen from him, and that snake's going to hit you for like 30 seconds off your time.
Yeah,
it's funny, while we're on the topic of bosses, you guys seem to unanimously feel like the spider boss was the worst. But I'm looking through some notes that I made here, and for whatever reason, I don't think of that enemy as being a spider, even though it's got these kind of flailing appendages. But I think I liked that boss fight the best of the bunch. Just because it's the first time in the game that you have to kind of build a strategy against an enemy. Because so listeners, you have this boss, it's a large center mass, and then, these sort of spider-like appendages, and they're like balls, like chains of balls, which it might be a tie-in reference to our Joe and Mac episode where we're talking about our love for ball neck characters. But this enemy flails these things around, shoots projectiles, and you kind of have like a short window to like get in there and blast it in its eye, which is kind of located in the center mass. And then these spider legs or whatever like close in and seal its eye up, and then you have to use your super to hit it. Yeah, I don't know. I compared to all the rest of them, I liked it. I mean, you've got the first one, Larnia. What is this? Lamia. Yeah, who is like, what is she? Like a snake woman?
Like a naga or something. Naga.
Yeah. And she sort of pops up and like moves at a distance, and then like you have this weird situation in the middle of the room where you're sort of barriered off from being able to access her. That must have been difficult with Jack Ripper. I mean, did you guys have any trouble?
No, because she doesn't have much health, so you can just walk up and just complete brute force. Yeah, just brute force.
Pretty much.
Assuming you can hit her from the angle that she comes down in. Is there RNG in her movements? Or?
As soon as she pops up, your knife is going to reach her, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. There's no 2 cycles and she's done. Like
the other hard one was the vampire boss, because the floors was
it's all conveyor belts.
And it just kept on shifting, and if you're trying to knife him, that was a real bit.
Yeah, because you would have to like keep moving against it, but some conveyor belts are faster than the other ones. So if you switch around to another one, your whole movement gets all messed up. And
I don't know what it was. I wasted that guy with the guy
because you didn't play as Jack Ripper.
If you did play as Jack Ripper, it's a completely different game.
Yeah. I don't know, that's fun though. I mean, because at least it's a completely different experience. And it's
Brandon just said that's fun about Jack Bros. Got it on the record.
Delete that, Frank. But
I'm gonna make it really loud
and like put like an awkward pause at the beginning and end of it. Yeah.
Do an echo.
That would be great. I feel like we would be remiss here not to mention that I guess damn near every stage starts with an annoying preface by the Pixie character, who we've mentioned by name, but haven't gone into any detail yet. She is a playable character. She is what's the annoying fairy from the
Navi.
Zelda series? Navi.
Navi.
Yeah, she's like a Navi character.
Hey,
and
listen.
she pops up, and you can't skip past her. And you can, at best, I think you can hold down a button to like make her text
Speed her up a little bit.
speed her up,
Yeah.
but super annoying. And when I was getting used to playing the game initially, I spent a lot of time trying to troubleshoot some controller issues I was having, which is obviously not a fault of the game, but it was an experience nevertheless, which is actually when we get around to talking about the soundtrack, which is why I grew to hate a particular song. But yeah, so she pops up, you can't skip past her, and then I'm sitting here trying to fuss with this controller and then restarting the stage, and it was just a nightmare. Pixie, she's the worst.
If we haven't mentioned it, let me just kind of explain how the levels are worked out. So there's, let's say level 1 has 10 floors, and every floor is pretty small, and every floor is a puzzle. And then the puzzle is to get keys, open the door, and then drop down to the floor below it. So she would talk to you in floor 1. She would talk to you before you dropped to floor 2. She would talk to you in floor 2. She would talk to you before, and then so on and so forth. So she will talk to you like at least 20 times before you get to the boss, and then rinse and repeat. So, but
At some point, she says like, "Oh, I don't really know much about this area, so I'll be quiet." And we're like,
yeah. That did make me laugh actually, and it would be fine if she were conveying information that was even remotely useful or interesting, or something about the world, or like a
story
thing that you would
element.
not learn otherwise. But the general concept, if you haven't gathered at this point listening to this, is that this game is just super simple. Like the design is like just a very generic arcade experience.
It would be like if sorry, but it would just be like if like someone in the first Zelda, someone's like, every time you walked in a room, like, hey, there's Stalfos in this room, and there's skeletons that jump away when you try to hit them.
A great example.
in every room.
In every room.
Yeah, every room. So you go into a room, you see the skeletons, and then they're like, "Oh, by the way, there's skeletons here." It's like, "Yeah, I know, I see them."
Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah.
Well, anyone have any other thoughts on level design?
I will say on the bright side, if you continue, then all of her prompts are gone the next time you play through that level.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. That's...
Oh, sorry. Did you guys not continue? Are you that good at this game?
No.
No, I guess I just didn't notice. I was so annoyed by the experience. You figured I would be grateful, but yeah.
Well, one thing, Brandon might not like the way that the design was made, but I thought it was pretty cool that like it gradually got harder, and they would implement new elements every floor, and then like by the end of the game, all the elements of every floor were put into one floor. So like, there's these spikes, and then there's all the bomb guys, and then there's like a guy that'll run after you, and then there's like these Zelda type squishy things from like Link to the Past, like it's like these 2 spikes that if you go in between them, they'll crush you and stuff like that. So I don't know, I felt like it was gradually increasing the difficulty, even though it wasn't that hard. But
yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get into like some sort of final thought situation here, but I guess like the obstacle that I come up against as it pertains to that, like increasing difficulty or the introduction of new enemies, is that I just don't like this game at its foundation, like at its basis level.
Yeah.
And it's like, it makes it difficult when you don't like the look of something, you don't like the way it feels to play it, you don't like the level design. I mean, there's just all these things that keep adding up. And then like when it starts to do interesting things, like one of the later stages has the closest thing resembling a puzzle element to this, which is to move these rocks into the path of these sort of laser turrets. Yeah. In order to keep yourself from being hit, and so you can get in and grab a key and move out of an area. But stuff like that pops up, and that should feel like a satisfying development in the progression of this game. But I was just like, okay, let me just move this rock into the path of this thing and move on.
Yeah, well, it's like you mentioned earlier. None of these puzzles are like, you have to pause the game and think about it. Like it's like, push a rock in front of this thing, or this key is behind a guy, kill him. Like that's pretty much the puzzle.
And that's what I think. This game is very actiony. It's not. I don't know. It's not like Zelda where you can sit there and wait. Like it has a timer going down. Yeah. Like you really have to move.
But that is, in my opinion, and I think Joseph might agree with me on this. Like that is it's not fun. Like a game where like the entire structure, the sense of urgency or difficulty is based on a timer is boring to me. And if you are saying that you have a game here that is an action game first and foremost, and not a game where you should be looking for puzzles for your enjoyment, then the gameplay itself needs to be fun. And the way that it would be fun would be to cause some sort of flow, like some sort of give and take to the combat. And as it stands, it's not. It's just you. I'm literally my sole purpose for navigating this map is to find a key. And any enemy that comes up to me dies immediately. And like there's just no sense of, well, I mean, not
except
not
for
all
the
of them.
Cyclopses.
Yeah, the Cyclops is one thing, and maybe the Furin, you can't attack a Furin head on. But for the most part, you just waste these enemies and you just plow through them, which is why Frank has managed to get almost entirely through the game without dying. On your first experience. But you mentioned Zelda, and I kind of want to go back to one of Frank's other references during the summary of the game, and Gauntlet. Now, I might have some bias. I love the old Gauntlet games. One of my earliest NES experiences. I've played them in the arcade. I've played the remakes. As a matter of fact, Brian and I had a great time, I think, playing the remade one that came out on the PlayStation 4. Do you remember us going through that? Yeah. So, I mean, I like those kinds of games. Top-down, twin-stick shooter, or top-down action games of that nature. But the close quarters of the corridor, like with Gauntlet, you come into a big room, and you have a... I don't know what to call those. I forgot what the manual calls them. Traps, spawners. I think. But essentially spawn points that just like vomit out enemies and monsters. And, you have to contend with that, and you have to like move around, and they're coming at you in numbers. So this game Gauntlet throws big numbers at you in order to make the combat fun. But this game, can't do that because of the size of the corridor. And then
it takes elements from various games and shoves them together. Like it's corridors like Bomberman, but you don't have a bomb.
Right. You don't have a bomb, and Bomberman is a puzzle game first and foremost in all iterations, with the exception of maybe that Xbox 360 one. I don't know. It takes elements from those games that you mentioned, but like doesn't
they don't
doesn't
work
take the
together.
good ones.
And they don't work together. And I'm not saying it's a good game. Like I just don't have much hate as much as you did.
Well,
I guess.
Yeah.
My theory is, and it's not really much of a theory because I'm probably just going to prove it. I think this design, it just all comes back to the Virtual Boy, because they had to do a timer because they don't want people playing this for that long.
Yeah,
that is true.
And it's all just comes down to the fact that you can't look at the screen for that long, and that's why there's only 6 stages. That's why there's very simplistic
that's
gameplay.
So wild. Like what must have those conversations been like at Nintendo in Japan, like or Atlas of Japan or wherever, like when they're having this conversation? It's like, okay, playing this system will literally make you sick.
You'll have to go to the doctor.
You are absolutely going to suffer some sort of irreversible calamity if you play this game for more than 30 minutes. That's nuts. The Virtual Boy would never ever come out nowadays.
No.
The Nintendo would never risk putting a piece of hardware out. I don't know. It's just
even the 3D when it came out on the 3DS, like it was a big controversy. Like, oh yeah, don't let your kids use it. It'll burn their eyes out and stuff like that. Like, but it's I don't know. It's weird. Like it was the perfect time. It was the 90s. Everybody was crazy, right? Like
everyone was
now
just
that you
crazy.
mentioned it, the other game that I liked on the Virtual Boy was Innsmouth no Yakata, which is a Lovecraftian theme, and that was also timed. I guess it's one of those
I think they just
things
had
that they
to,
must have done.
Which is funny because I think there's the skeleton, for lack of better terms, of a good game here and get some good ideas where they probably had, maybe I'm just projecting that, but maybe they had more ambitious plans for it. But there's just all you can do with it.
Yeah, you got to wonder,
Yeah.
I mean, and I wonder if something as simple as changing, like if this game would have came out on the Super Nintendo, for instance, or Super Famicom or whatever, the ability to have that sort of color palette that console had, would have lit this game up like Christmas. And I mean, it would have. I mean, I've seen pictures of other Megami Tensei related stuff since within the last 2 weeks of us playing this game, and it's certainly a game with a vibrant and lively aesthetic design, like the in all of them, whether it be the Persona stuff or the the Megami Tensei stuff, and it just, man, it feels like I don't know. I look at those other games and I go, man, like Virtual Boy, like maybe we need to make a Doki Doki Game Club bar for the foreseeable future on Virtual Boy games. But
well, to be fair, every list that I've seen, like, oh, what are good Virtual Boy games? There's only one, and it's this game. Or like,
that's weird, right? Yeah.
No, I played through most of them, and this is it's slim pickings.
Well, it's funny though, because you can actually see what could have been on the Super NES days, because not that long ago, Atlas launched a free Shin Megami Tensei spin-off Jack Frost platformer that was
which is really, really, really good.
Yeah, it was like a promo for Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey Redux, which is like it's a 3DS game, right?
Yeah, it's like a remake, 3DS remake of a DS game.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it had Jack-o'-lantern and Jack Frost in it.
That's pretty cool. I mean,
and it's a Metroidvania, and it's great. It's really fun.
And it's free.
It's specifically DS though.
No,
it's a PC.
It's on PC. Okay. You can play it in like your browser, I guess. Or no, you can download it. It's a free download.
No,
did it run on the Mac?
Probably through Wine.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if they had.
Okay, yeah. Well, I just figured, since you brought it up, Joseph, I thought maybe you tried.
No,
to play
I just remember when it came out, and I was tempted to play it, but I didn't get a chance.
Yeah, I played it through completion. It took me maybe 3 or 4 hours, and it's a short game, but the pixel art is amazing. The soundtrack is good, and it's essentially like a sequel to Jack Bros, I guess, where you play as either Pyro Jack or Jack Frost, and you kind of switch between both of them. So one's ice, one's fire, and then like some enemies project fire, so you can switch and it doesn't damage you and stuff like that. It's really has cool mechanics.
Kind of got like an Ikaruga sort of thing.
Very Ikaruga kind of, and it I don't know. It's a very good game. I know this podcast is not about that game, but check it out.
It is now.
But at this point, yeah. Anything we can get to wash the taste out. Okay, so we've spent the last hour attempting to come into common grounds on Jack Bros. It's good and bad qualities, and now comes the point in the show where we're going to lay it all on the line, all right here. So let's get some final thoughts, and maybe something that works and something that doesn't. How about let's start with Joseph on that?
All right. I think my final thoughts, I kind of summed up. Just the overview where I think this is all based on the needs of the Virtual Boy first and foremost, which is kind of makes it can't be timeless that way, so I'll go ahead and get into my plus and minus, my good versus bad. For the plus, I'd say music and sound effects were good to me. The tunes are mostly really catchy, and I love the blood curdling sound the password numbers make when they pop up. That's really fun. For minuses, I don't like timer maze play games. Like I don't like timers at all. If there's a timer on a game, it immediately turns me off. So as one of my least favorite types of games, like I just from the first stage on, I was like, man, I'm not going to have a great time with this.
I not to cut you off, I do want to add to that I know people are probably listening to this and going, well, Super Mario Brothers has a timer on it, and all these other games have timers on it. But like, it's really important to point out that this game has taken the timer and tried to make a mechanic out of it.
Your
and
health
I think that's
is
where
your
we all
timer.
agree that the problem lies. So.
Yeah.
So you want that final score?
Yeah, please lay it on me.
I'm going to give Jack Bros a 1.5. I'd rather have the disease from the movie Jack than play Jack Bros again. Out of 5.
Very good, very good. All right, Brian, what do you got there? You're going to save this? You're going to pull this game out of the fire?
Yeah. Actually, it is short and simplistic. I'll definitely hand you that. But I thought it was fun running around that. I was going to say that it didn't seem like there would be much replayability, but there are different characters and, a character you can unlock, and that I think that I don't know. I can see myself going back to it at some point. Why not? I'm gonna give it a hearty 3.5 Brotendos out of 5.
All right. Well, there
Our
you
most
go.
divisive ep yet.
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
so. All right, I'm going to go, and then we'll let Frank cap it off. So I think I've been clear as a bell that I'm not enjoying this game at all. There are so many problems with it, whether it be limitations of the system. I mean, it just, to me, like the realization of that, like going, okay, well, the Virtual Boy is going to make you sick if you play it. And so you can only play it in small bursts. Just why bother? Why make any of these games then? You know, like I guess I just grew up, and especially in like 1995, like that era, and like, you know, the sort of 5 years or so leading up to that, man, I was playing a ton of games, and like I could play them for long lengths of time. Like that was definitely sort of the end of my gaming life at that stage, where I could play games for just like hours and hours on end. And while that's not like my biggest complaint about this, because whether the game, you know, whether the 30-minute warning thing popped up or not, I would not want to play this game for, you know, more than 10 or 15 minutes at a time, I don't think. But, you know, things that are good about it, you know, I know we didn't really go into music at all. And, you know, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, you know, 8 or 9 episodes in at this point, you know, talking about my love for video game music. But there are definitely some choice songs in the soundtrack. I mean, I can't stand the one that I'm sure Frank used repeatedly. But the rest of the music is so moody. And like, it kind of reminded me of sort of like a modern update to Shadowgate, which I know Brian sort of shares my affinity for that soundtrack. It's like, it's moody, and it's definitely dungeon crawl appropriate. So that's the thing I like the most, and I think the thing I probably liked the least was just the limitation of the stage design. It was just moving through a corridor, and it's just not something that I enjoy doing. So I'm going to rate this. We can't do less than 1, can we? Is that the
0.5?
You can do a 0.5.
Okay. This will
0.5
be.
will work.
I'm flat out going to rate this 0.5. I don't think I would. I don't think I would ever play this game again. I don't know that I'll ever play a Virtual Boy game again. Not even for like the disgusting novelty of curiosity of it.
Sadistic.
Yeah. I mean, unless I'm really like full of self-hate one day, and then I just I'll fire it up at that point. But yeah, 0.5. I dislike this game so much that I'm not even going to throw a witty a witty ranking on it. It's just a flat out like desolate wasteland 0.5 floating in the middle of a desert. And how about you, Frank?
Well, you know, I always wanted to play the game, and I did, and I probably never will again. But for me, the pros are that I have all these chibified characters from a series of games that I really like. So it was cool to kind of see those designs, especially like you mentioned earlier, like in this character select and the credits and stuff like that. They have like these really cool designs, and I wish an artist would maybe kind of export that and put it in color. I don't know if
that would be
somebody
nice.
did. That would be really cool, because like they're really kind of stylized, and like it was cool to see like Beelzebub in that way, and there's all these kind of bosses that come from the series, and it was cool to see it that way. So that'd be my pro, I guess. And the music was pretty good and stuff like that. The bad, I guess it's not to the fault of Jack Bros, but it would be the fault of the system itself, like the Virtual Boy. I got a serious headache playing this. Like after like my session, because I played like a good maybe 40 minutes of it straight, and
40-minute Jack session. Man.
Yeah. In red, like I didn't change the color.
Oh boy.
And even like my wife, like she would look over and she's like, "Oh, that is like very unpleasant to look at." And she wasn't playing it. She was just like sitting next to me on the couch, and I was like, "Yeah, it's not good." But that's
crazy.
My
that note,
negative.
maybe my color blindness was a
Maybe,
filter for this.
You're not
didn't
affected by red though, man.
Brian just saw black and white.
Not. Yeah, right. It was all that way.
No, for me, it was I could bear it, but by the end, I had like a pretty big headache, and I was just like, okay. And I wasn't even playing it I was playing it on a monitor, like a 2D surface. So I can't even imagine playing this like in completion, like in a sitting on a Virtual Boy, because you would peel your eyes out. Like it would be that scene in Event Horizon. Like, It would just be that bad. So I would give it, because I like the series and the music and the art style was good, I'm going to give it a 2.5 hee-hoes out of 5.
Okay. Well, so let's pretend for a moment that that you're interested in playing this game, despite my my urgings not to, and you want to get a hold of it. As is with the case with all of our game selections, this one's costly, to say the least. I'm sure there's probably more expensive Virtual Boy games, and maybe one of our listeners can chime in, on some social media with the most expensive Virtual Boy games. But this one's still pretty expensive. If you get this one loose, you're looking at $258. Seems to be kind of the accumulated average. So loose out of the box.
I'm pretty sure Zach didn't get his at that price. It must have been
I'm going to take a wild guess
years
and say
ago,
probably not. I also wonder how long Zach's had that copy, though, but I digress.
Better part of a decade, I'm thinking.
Yeah. So if you were to get a hold of this game now, complete in box, and strangely enough, pricecharting.com, which is the website we referenced that sort of has an aggregator for prices that this game is sold for online and collector's market, has the complete in box and the brand new price to be identical. So you're looking at about $500, whether you get this thing in the shrink or not. Yeah, I don't know. I wonder how many units of this were manufactured. How much of that is just a failed Virtua Boy novelty price, and how much of it is just because Atlas is pretty infamous, if memory serves, especially with I think of like their DS games of being limited runs of things and overinflated prices. So. Tough to say.
Well, this is almost $100 a stage if you want it in the box. So
it's true. Oh my God! Don't think of it that way. You'll never buy a game ever if you think of the price versus what you're getting in terms of stages. So,
but at least you know you're getting quality content.
True.
Well, without further ado, I'd say it's time for
Doki Doki Power Line.
That's right, it's Doki Doki Powerline, where we plug you into the source for the hottest gamer tips and tricks. The winner of this episode's Powerline Pro Tip comes straight from Pixie herself. She's written in, and I do believe Joseph has that message.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
She got there.
I'm not going to read it in Pixie's voice.
Oh no,
there's not going to be a "Hey, listen" or anything like that. But there's actually four little tips we got for you that Pixie was nice enough to float our way. So first off, to see the entire map at once, you need to press start to pause, then press up, left, down, and right. And there's also a hard mode in this game if the regular 6 stages weren't challenging enough for you. So to access that, at the title screen, you're going to use the left control pad to press right 6 times, left 3 times, and then right 6 times. And then I think this might be why Pixie sent this in, because you can actually play as Pixie. And you can either do that by finishing hard mode, which who wants to do that? Or you can enter 4649 at the password screen and confirm by holding L plus R plus select plus A. And if you were that into Hiroyuki Yanada's incredible soundtrack, then you're going to hit the sound test in the Japanese version only. And that's at the title screen, use the left control pad to press up 3 times and down 4 times.
All right. Well, thank you, Pixie, for having the decency to chime in, as it were. So, at this point, it's time to announce our next episode's title, and if I'm not mistaken, it's Brian's selection. So what do you got, Mr. Grogan?
My next choice goes all the way back to my gaming roots with Impossible Mission for the Commodore 64.
Taking it way back.
And that concludes episode 8 of Doki Doki Game Club. Before we retreat back into our eye-blasting red-tinged hellscapes, I want to thank my key-hoarding co-hosts for joining me today. Who are you guys, and where can people find you? Let's start with Brian.
Yes, I am known online as Ken O. You can find me on Twitter as at Ken O Shinobi.
And how about you, Frank?
You can. My name is Frank Martin. You can find me on Twitter at Hios_IO and on Twitch at Hios_.
And Mr. Joseph Lester.
Yes, my name is Joseph Lester, and you can find me on Twitter at Moldylocks. You can check my website at subhumanzoids.com. Spell It Like You Smell It, and I have another podcast called Subhuman Cast, and we should have another episode recording soon, so check that out on all the platforms.
And if Twitter is your thing and you want to follow me personally, I am Genocide over there. That's DJINNOCIDE. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Doki Doki GC. In addition to that, we're practically on every other social network online as well, so search for Doki Doki Game Club all across the World Wide Web or head over to dokidokigameclub.com for further details. Thank you once again to everyone who continues to tweet about us using hashtag DokiDokiGC or shares a link to the show on Facebook. And last but not least, we have a Patreon. So if you have a couple of bucks you can spare and you'd like to show us your support in that manner, you can head on over to patreon.com/Doki Doki Game Club, where we have some pretty neat rewards available to anyone interested in supporting us in that fashion. So, on behalf of Brian, Frank, Joseph, and myself, thanks for listening. Until next time, adios, Battletoads.